Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Eating Peace this week. It's been an exciting week. Some of you have been able to watch inside the Facebook Eating Peace group a daily mindfulness practice when it comes to accessing peace, eating peace, inner peace, mindful peace. And it all begins with our thinking. And of course, it's okay if you don't even know what I'm talking about as far as this private Facebook group. There's an Eating Peace group that you can join. And I just decided to give a video daily, offer that daily as a build up really to this Eating Peace immersion program that's going to start. And one thing that I've noticed is with all recovery, with compulsive eating and all the plans of like being in control or being out of control, like getting on the wagon, getting off the wagon, getting on that diet and then going off the diet. There's sort of this flip-flop, like black and white, intense thinking and kind of an effort to control and get willpower and pull it together, and you don't really have any other option but just to follow this program. That's it. And of course, it feels much more peaceful. It feels better to be not overeating, right? To be relaxed when it comes to food and eating, to not panic, to not be filled with anxiety and then move towards food, or have like obsessive thoughts all day long about food and that you want to eat something, but you're going to try to fight not to eat it. I'm just suggesting with this mindfulness, if you notice that, the tug of war inside, so painful, is just to consider that you have what it takes to take a look at why this tug of war has risen in your life. What is going on? Sometimes if you stop eating compulsively, or just like people who quit smoking, you maybe have something else in your life. Like I noticed that about myself, that I would overwork. I would be determined and intense and let's press on and move forward and work on the business and like not give myself any rest. I noticed that as a theme in my life, and it took me a long time to actually notice, wow, that's happening. I'm still operating in some ways with fear under the surface when it comes to certain situations or people, or maybe even feeling safe at a deep survival level. I had this experience of abandonment, quote unquote. That was my story in divorce, marriage and divorce. And really felt like that was my story, is that I was abandoned. And it disrupted kind of a sense deep inside of feeling safe in the world, feeling secure. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough experience. My resume isn't good enough. I need to get a job. And all this came rising up like a fountain, almost overwhelming. And if I had not had the work, I would have followed that, and who knows where it would have gone. And I was managing sometimes with sort of mental stories, handling the situation or managing and looking at my emotions and feeling afraid. There's nothing wrong with having an enormous amount of feelings and even being overwhelmed. It's just when we are in a compulsive process, we're helping ourselves stop feeling so strongly. And what I find, so that we don't repeat that, so I don't repeat it, so I take a look, is to identify my story, identify what it is I'm thinking deep inside, what it is I'm afraid of about life, about what's happened with this other person, and then really sit with it and question it and look at it closely to see if it's true. That is the link between doing the work of Byron Katie, which is such a simple way to identify stories and then ponder them and question them. That is the link between doing the work of Byron Katie and compulsion and this eating thing. So I know Some people are really, really experienced and familiar with the work of Byron Katie, and some people not so much. Like, what is the self-inquiry thing going on when it comes to compulsion? I just need to stop. So one of the most important questions or stories you can identify is when it comes to just the initial piece of this compulsive behavior is, I can't handle what's happening. I can't handle what's happening. Fear. And just look and see if it's of other people. Other people have been frightening in our lives for some of us. There's been things that have happened, events in our lives, sometimes really old, way back, that were really disturbing. And our belief and our story is, I never, ever, ever want that to happen again. And you may notice, I would notice it in work situations where I had a boss, somebody in authority. I would be incredibly pleasing. So a little short story. Long, long ago, at one of my first jobs out of college, only in my early 20s, I had a boss. So interestingly, I worked at a university, which is, my father was a professor, and you know how some of us just fall into similar environments or similar places, because that's what we've heard about. Very similar to our family, to our parents. There I was at a university, felt very comfortable being on campus, and I just had an office job, like an office basic kind of assistant job. And I remember that after being there for about 6 months, a boss came in. My boss came in. The boss of my boss. I had one person that I reported to, and then there was another person up above beyond that, with a bigger office down the hall. And I didn't interact with him all that often, but he came in, and I don't even remember what it was said, but it was something around something I had missed and done incorrectly. Something that was like, this is really not going right, and so if you would do this, this, and this, that would be much better. He wasn't super angry. He wasn't extremely critical. I don't think so. But when he left, I had this sinking, horrible feeling of having done it wrong. I did it wrong. I did not know at the time that I was relating it almost exactly to the same feeling inside as my father. This guy even looked like my father when I look back and think about it. Really funny. Interesting to notice. So I just was carrying, the minute that thing happened, it was like an echo of this previous experience of the potential to be absolutely rejected, thrown out of somebody's life or environment, to be unlovable, to be unwantable, to be somebody who was a hassle because they had to correct my behavior. That I was like an imposition somehow. All these things started rising up from one process that I found out I had been doing wrong for a little while. Remember, it wasn't just once. He was talking to me about I did it wrong for a while, and then I was just mortified. What happened at the time in my young days of being in that compulsion and having so much trouble with food and eating, because it was still underway, and I had been in a group, and I was beginning to look and see the emotional life that kind of ran my compulsion, but I was barely there. I went to 12-step meetings sometimes. I was just kind of looking what my philosophy was, but really didn't notice these personal difficulties and traumas under the surface, this sense of rejection. So what happened is, this happened in the morning. Well, a little while later, as soon as he left the office, I have all these disrupted feelings. And then what happens after that? I wonder if I could get something to eat. And it just happened to be that a student brought in a gift for these people that worked in the office, including me. And it was a big box of chocolates, all different kinds of chocolates. And there was a coworker who opened up the box and was opening this box to me and saying, "Would you like one?" Anxiety, anxiety, like channel has changed. Now there's chocolates right here. Of course I would like one. That's just, there's a resistance feeling, but then with all this anxiety, definitely I wanted to reach for one of those chocolates in that box. And I did eat one. And there was sort of management of this box. Don't eat too many in front of anyone. I don't want anyone to see it, which just shows it's part of the addiction process. I'm ashamed. I would not ever tell anyone that I was feeling these feelings that was in that office. I mean, God forbid ever do that, or call anybody. That wasn't even accessible in my story. This was just, this story needs to die and it needs to end, and I must do everything I can to hide it. Very ashamed. So just, managing, like barely holding back from eating too many of those that wouldn't look right. Laughter and joking about this box of chocolates that, oh my gosh, don't we want more? Ha ha ha. With the other people, and offering it sometimes to people who came into the office. But the entire day spent trying not to eat too many of those, and then just thinking about what I was going to eat as soon as I left the building. And I remember even how the steps looked leaving that building, that university building, and the railing, and skipping down them and going to my car in the parking lot and just getting in my car ready to go to the first place that sounded good to buy something to eat. I didn't even know in my mind where it was going to be, but believe me, there was going to be something, because our world is filled with eateries, places to buy food. So had I been able to tie together that kind of incredible fear of criticism and doing it wrong, I might have been able to relax and look and have some self-compassion. Oh, I really feel like I made a mistake. I made a terrible mistake. I'm scared. I could write it down, the story. If I had known the work of Byron Katie, who probably at that time was about the time when Byron Katie was first waking up herself, just first having a recognition, and actually probably not even yet. So if I had known, though, because previous to Byron Katie too, and having the work, there was mindful inquiry. There was looking and seeing that a story is being carried here about the world and reality, that it's dangerous, and I've been criticized, and I could be kicked out, and I could lose all my income, and I could not survive, and I could be unlovable, and I better hide it, by the way, too, P.S. It's a terrible, brutal, kind of socked in way to live, and who doesn't want to eat or do something, panicking for, to pleasure, to get out of that kind of mindset. So looking at feeling criticized by somebody is incredibly powerful, and it's okay to do it in more recent state of mind. But so important when it comes to this food and eating compulsion is just to identify where you've had trouble with other human beings. And it sounds like it might be a process. It is a process. That's why I often refer to this mindful eating as an eating peace process. Because we just notice sometimes there's a rainstorm, and then the sun comes out and it's relaxed and quiet. But do we need to eat around that thing? And here's the thing that I wanted to share today, the most of all. Many times when people are in that state, I sure was, the belief underlying all of it is that I am not normal, I am a bad person, I am just simply a compulsive addict, and I'll never get over this. That's just who I am. That's how it is. And I could never be a person who simply wasn't interested in food or eating compulsively. Just pleasure about food and eating. It's a joy to have pleasure about food and eating. It's supposed to be pleasurable. It's a natural drive, in human beings, eating and consuming for fuel and to live and to enjoy it. How exciting. It's a beautiful thing, but not too much, Isn't it interesting how you kind of lose the pleasure of eating when you get full. I mean, really, if you really ask yourself in your body, it starts to not feel good at all. And of course, those of us who've had binges, you feel sick and horrible and terrible. The food is definitely not doing it anymore. So there's just this belief inside that there is something incredibly deeply missing or wrong with me. And I would never just actually not be interested, become somebody who's just not interested. And I did not find that to be true. By looking at where I have felt frightened of other people and events in my life that have maybe nothing to do with food or eating. You know, my desire to be thin, my body has to be right, I have to be acceptable to these other people, that's the only way I'm going to have love. Just looking at love and attachment and connection and fear of criticism, all of it, trauma that I've experienced, to look at that, to look at it, the compulsion to eat drops away. That is possible for anyone. It is possible for you. You do not have to manage or follow a special program for the rest of your entire life. That's what I found to be true. You don't have to say about yourself that you are just simply untrustworthy and it's just not going to be possible to be a normal person. There's some sense I have found, and when I work with people, there's a sense of, there's a normalcy, there's a place inside that is just simply quiet consciousness that can work with any of this, just no matter what's going on. There's not a need to eat. You can sort of resolve or find safety in the middle of all that trauma. And yes, it may take some work. It may take some looking, but isn't that worth it compared to the incredible effort to stuff yourself with food and then feel awful afterwards? I mean, that is a huge, enormous amount of energy and effort spent on that to make sure you just don't scare yourself with the anxiety or the feelings or the discomfort of what you've experienced about reality. A huge amount of effort. And it just becomes uninteresting to do it anymore or to hurt yourself anymore when you really question what you're thinking. And that includes that you can't handle it. You can't handle strong emotions, that you are unlovable and you did it wrong and you're worthy of rejection. Can you absolutely know that's true? Who would you be without that story? Who would you be? What would you be? What would it be like without that story? And that's why doing the work and the self-inquiry is so important in Eating Peace. That's what we do in the Eating Peace process. We move into the stories that have triggered an urge to be compulsive in the first place. And they are stories. They're not ultimate reality. And so underneath it all is a normalcy. And believing that that's true is a good step, good first step. That you can relax and rest within yourself. Even if you feel terrified and afraid or filled with cravings or feel like you must binge eat or whatever, there's something that is below that and it can pass. And you can become somebody who is normal around food and eating. If you think that's not the case, that's good to notice. If you think you just cannot be normal ever about food and eating, great to notice. Great to notice. It's a story. All right. Let me know how it goes. Lots of love, everybody.